tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
By the way, the gun buyback, the quote unquote gun buyback that the Liberals had promised that was supposed to cost between 400 and 600 million, now projected to be over 2 billion. And they have spent, I forget exactly how much, but they've spent millions of this without even getting a single firearm yet. So the Liberal government on its gun buyback has managed to spend millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, and not actually got any guns. Now, I don't mind this. I've said this, like I don't support government waste, but I'm happy that the gun buyback does not exist, because the gun buyback is not a buyback. It's a confiscation scheme that the government is trying to pretend is just this like administrative priority. Now, because the government has been so bad at doing this, because they've been so incompetent, they're now getting pressure put on them from the gun control groups and advocates that were pushing this in the first place, who think that the Liberals are basically, as the word from Polly Sosuvia, abandoning efforts on this. Now, I think gun owners would probably love it if that were the case. It's not. Tracey Wilson joins us on the line. Tracey, it's always good to talk to you. She is with the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Thanks for coming on today.
Hey, Andrew. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So there are a few different moving parts on this. I mean, one is that, I mean, I know are obviously tied into the firearms issue, but you're a taxpayer as well. And I'm sure on one hand, you don't like government wasting money, but as a gun owner, you're probably thrilled that they haven't managed to make this gun grab happen on their part. But why is it that they're now getting pressure from the gun control advocates? Why are they unhappy when, from my perspective, the Liberals have basically given them everything they want?
Well, they actually won't be happy until the, doors of gun owners like me across the country are kicked in by law enforcement and our stuff is forcibly confiscated. I've said right from the beginning, it doesn't matter how far the Liberals or any other government goes to appease them, they'll never be satisfied. So we saw with C-21 and the amendments G4 and G46 that they had to withdraw. They went right after hunting rifles, and they're going to do it again. So, the anti-gun lobby also professes that there are all kinds of assault-style firearms that have evaded this ban, and escaped it. While at the same time, I think most Canadians know that real assault rifles were banned back in the 70s, and this is just a further assault on legal gun owners.
You have this attitude among some gun advocates that they will not give an inch. They will not give an inch. And I think that there's some merit to that, because people like us, and certainly people like you, have seen what happens when the inch is given. And the one trend, certainly with this Liberal government, that's become clear is that wherever they say the line is drawn between an acceptable and an unacceptable gun will change the second they ban that. The second they implement that line, it moves. And I think the so-called assault rifle conundrum is an example of that, where they say the line is here and then, okay, and then handguns now. And then at a certain point, I think you're right, that I don't believe the gun control advocates would be happy until Grandpa's musket, the last musket from, 1787, is being pried out of some old farmer's hands in Saskatchewan, will they?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you look at it, it's not even just the last 9 years of Liberal regime, but for over 30 years now, Polly Soussouvian has been calling the shots. They've gotten everything they've wanted. The increase in gun control just in the last 30 years is substantial. We've got some of the strictest regimes in the world, and yet that's still not enough. They won't be satisfied until our doors are kicked in and until they can basically abolish civilian gun ownership. And I know they profess on social media that that isn't true, but they haven't been very definitive about where their line is. Every time they get what they want, they move that goalpost a little bit more to include even more firearms. So, and at the end of the day, whether I'm a gun owner or a taxpayer, I'm also a mom and a grandma, and I see the increase in violence. And I think, what could those resources do for our communities if they were better invested in real public safety measures?
We're getting a little bit off topic here, but there was a big seizure in Peel region, which is in the Greater Toronto area last week, and police seized 71 guns, and all of the Liberals were jumping up and down saying, "Oh, great, this is Justin Trudeau, and his gun control in action." 69 of the 71 guns were smuggled in from the United States, so zero
Yes.
connection whatsoever to any restrictions that any government would put in on lawful gun ownership and licensing, and the remaining two may have been smuggled in as well. The origins just couldn't be traced. So it's possible that every single one of them, but certainly the majority were. But at the end of the day, gun owners are a minority in Canada. There are, maybe 2 million of us in a country of 36 million or so. How do you communicate this to a lot of people who just in their quiet, peaceful suburban existence don't think of guns and are really susceptible to the first bit of propaganda that comes across their news?
Well, I mean, I would like to think that we live in a country where we don't attack somebody just because they're a minority, just because that's
Mhm.
not how most Canadians live. I mean, I don't know. And that's a whole different rabbit hole we could go down. But at the same time, I think this does touch every Canadian, whether you own a firearm or not. Because number one, there's the property rights issue. So if the government, if I followed every rule and regulation, regardless of how ridiculous they are, complied with everything, and at the end of the day it doesn't matter, they're going to come and take my stuff, then that should sound big red flags for all Canadians. And secondly, when nobody thinks about violence happening to them, and of course the majority of us will never experience it at that kind of lethal level, but I'm sure that everybody who's been a victim of violence thought that too. So as we see crime rates rise in communities all across the country, I think everyday Canadians are going to start saying, like, hey, what is going on here? The focus has been on the wrong people for at least for the last 9 years, if not the last 30. And I think it's time to sort of recenter that balance and get back to being serious about making safer communities.
To go back to the assault rifle ban, the so-called assault rifle ban, one of the claims that the group has made in its criticism here is that tens of thousands of quote-unquote assault-style guns prohibited in 2020 remain in the hands of their owners. Now, this is referring to, of course, the fact that, my AR-15 has not been able to leave my gun safe since they were banned. I still mine, but I'm not allowed to legally do anything with it, so it's remained there collecting dust. But the whole point here is that if you are minded to follow the law, like I am and like you are, that gun is providing no safety hazard to anyone, whether I'm legally allowed to take it to the range or not. And as we've talked about in the case of Peel Region, the police that are seizing these guns have said time and time again, these guns are unregistered, they're unlicensed owners. But this word assault rifle does so much heavy lifting for the Liberals here. And I know I've talked about this, but for people listening that are not as in this, what does that word mean or what does it not mean?
Well, it's globally understood that the term assault rifle refers to a fire that has a firearm that has select fire capability. In other words, it's able to go full auto. In Canada, those have been banned since 1978. So those are unavailable to civilians, and nobody's asking for anything different. What they're targeting with this May 2020 OIC and what Polly Soussouvian keeps referring to as assault style firearms, by definition, is something is styled after something else. It is not that thing which it is styled after. So what they're talking about is more modern sporting arms. So I know as a female, a young, well, not a young, an older female of small stature, I know for me, it's really important to have a firearm that is compatible to my size and shape. And a lot of these modern firearms have all kinds of adjustable stocks and a pistol grip and things like this. So anything that looks scary is now, on that ban list, and of course in the target of Polysusouvier, so to speak. But at the same time, this is technology advancing. I mean, my truck sitting in my laneway right now doesn't look anything like my grandfather's truck that we used to drive on the farm with, right? So it stands to reason that a lot of my guns don't look like my grandfather's either.
Yeah, and the reality is, and again, I don't want to give them any ideas here, but if you were to want to have an intellectually consistent and honest position, it would be that all guns are capable of killing, and all guns
Of
therefore
course.
should be banned. This idea of drawing an arbitrary line that is ultimately based on appearance is just so insanely ridiculous. And again, I don't want to push that argument too far, because I know there's going to be some Liberal member of Parliament that will say, yes, you're right, let's ban all of them. And I think certainly if they thought they could, they would. But the reality is, when they draw these lines, they do not make any sense.
No, they don't. And that's how you know it's just political theater. I mean, when you start, you've got this big basket of firearms, and of course there's all kinds. It's a very unique item, right? There's all kinds of them, all shapes and sizes and colors and functionalities. The problem is that it'll never be enough for them. No matter what they stick in that band basket, it'll never be enough for them, and they want to keep adding more into there. And they actually complain about new firearms on the market as well, and this is a big problem, because as the rules and the laws change with this ever-changing liberal gun control, what manufacturers do is they get inventive and creative, and they start creating new firearms to comply with those new rules. And Police de Souvien says, well, what they're doing is circumventing the law and making new assault style firearms. No, they're complying with the law. Like, it's absolutely breathtaking to see the desperation they've got. But I mean, here we are. I'm not going to ramble on too long about this, but we are 4 years down the road from when they first banned them. Every single firearm is still exactly where it was before, safely locked away in the gun rooms and safes of legal licensed gun owners. And yet crime is still raging out of control. So, Canadians need to ask themselves, maybe we took a wrong turn here and focused on the wrong demographic.
Tracey Wilson, VP of Public Relations for the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Always good to talk to you, Tracey. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Andrew. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.